What's going on, guys? Today I just wanted to give you some insight on the Mystic Dispersion and Dexterity beta testing that is going on right now, as this could potentially have a big impact on the way that we play the game going forward. Now, before I get into what the actual changes are, it's important to note that this is just a beta test. Meaning everything that I'm going to explain here, everything that you see in this video is subject to change. This might not be the final iteration of these changes that actually hit the live servers. Everything could change based on the beta testers' feedback, which is awesome because this allows the players to have a little bit more say on the changes that are going into the game. Of course, still controlled by Kabam, but they're letting us in a little bit more, and this is exactly the type of thing that we want to see going forward. Also important to note that there definitely could potentially be some bugs found on the testing realms here, which is also good because that means we avoid the bugs that hit the live servers, and you don't got to spend your units on bugs because nobody likes to do that, right? Alright, so let's get into what the actual changes are. So the way that it's set up is you can't actually see the changes in the mastery trees. Everything is kind of disabled here in the masteries themselves. But if we go into the little bit of testing ground that they have set up for us, we'll see here that the Dexterity and Mystic Dispersion changes are kind of just built right into the nodes themselves. So Dexterity now reads, evade all attacks while dodging back, which it always did that, right? Dodging an attack in this way grants a buff, increasing your critical rating by plus 950. This is if you have all 3 points in it, lasting until 0.7 seconds after your next hit. So this is really cool. This means that you can kind of dash back a few times. You can, before it would kind of trigger Dexterity over and over, and if you had an enemy that had Mystic Dispersion, their power would just be skyrocketing. But now, it doesn't actually, the buff doesn't actually go away and reapply itself. Instead, it only goes away when you actually attack the enemy, or if it's nullified. And you're going to see just how important this is when I fight this Dormammu here with Stark Spidey in just a moment. Mystic Dispersion is changed as well. And it says Mystic Champions gain 12% power. Again, this is if you have Mystic Dispersion maxed out, 12%. They gain 12% power each time a buff is nullified or its duration expires off their opponent. So this is also a little bit different. This means that if you reapply a buff, take Star-Lord, for example. He has a little bit of a Fury buff to him, a percentage chance to gain Fury, at least on his normal attacks. And if you keep attacking with Star-Lord as that buff is kind of winding down, and it reapplies itself, well, it didn't expire, and it didn't get nullified, so it does not trigger Mystic Dispersion in that case. So it is a buff to champions like Star-Lord who have that kind of Fury gain to them, of which there's a lot of champions that have a buff that has a % chance to attack. So that's really cool to see. I think it's going to open up certain champions going forward, and some champions that we have in the game right now. Alright, so let's actually take a look versus this Dormammu, because this also affects things other than Mystic Dispersion. It also affects, like Dormammu has that degen that he applies on you every time a buff expires. So I'm going to go ahead and fight him with Stark Spidey here. And this is kind of a simulation of what you'd find in Alliance Wars. This is one of the Alliance War mini-bosses. I believe this is, at least. That's what most of these enemies in here look like, at least. And you'll see that if I build up my poise charges, I'm not going to be just feeding him power, and I'm not going to be gaining that degen on myself. And I have the Dexterity buff on me right now, and it did not go away and did not reapply itself right there. So I'm just going to build up a couple of these, and then I'm actually going to attack. Actually, I'll just attack right now. And you can see, once that Dexterity buff goes away, I mean, I still do, feed the enemy power. And I still am triggering, the degen on myself from Dormammu. So Mystic Champions, they're still going to be good defenders, so I'm still taking a ton of damage from Dormammu's degen here. He's still going to be a good defender, but it is going to allow you to actually use your abilities versus the character instead of before, where, yeah, it was so hard to actually build up any kind of poise charges versus Dormammu. You kind of had to have it happen naturally through your auto evades with the champion versus actually being able to build them up. So, really cool change. It's a big improvement to Stark Spidey anytime you're fighting a Mystic Champion, but the Mystic Champions, they are still going to be powerful. Let's take a look at a different character now. Actually, the next thing that I want to show you is probably the coolest thing about this update, which is just kind of a buff across the board to this Dexterity Mastery. If you notice, it lasts for 0.7 seconds, which allows you to actually get in more than one attack with that plus 950 crit rating. And I have to remind you that this is subject to change. This could potentially change, but that is a cruelty buff that you get with Dexterity. And if we take a look at Hyperion and some synergies that we have here, if we take a look at actually Black Bolt's synergies, he has one that actually extends the cruelty buff. So if, this one extends it by 30%, and I've got a few of these Black Bolts on the team, so I've got a few of those buffs. And Hyperion himself, he doesn't really have that high of crit rating. He does a lot of damage, right, because he gains a lot of attack just with his Furies and Cosmic Charges, but his crit rating itself is pretty low. It's in the dumps, 16.4. It's only 391 actual rating, so you add 950 to that, and suddenly Hyperion's damage just went up. So let's actually do a fight now with Hyperion. And again, subject to change. Very important to keep saying that, because this might not actually work this way, depending on if maybe this is too powerful or something. But this is really cool in my opinion. So I'm just going to go ahead and build up some power. I've got Dexterity on myself, and I'm just going to hit this guy with an L1. If he attacks me, there we go. So I actually got a few attacks in before the Dexterity went away. Oh, I didn't actually trigger Dexterity that time. Whoops. Alright, let me actually not use my special this time. And yeah, you can see like the majority of my hits there, of my 5-hit combo, I actually have the Dexterity buff. Come on, Jugs. There we go. So yeah, I got in 4 out of my 5-hit combo of actually having that that plus 950 crit rating. So that is a big deal for characters like Hyperion. Now, it's an even bigger deal depending on the champion that you're playing, because certain champions, they actually gain additional benefits based on landing critical hits with your attack. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few examples of that. Certain champions you kind of forget about, like Winter Soldier here, whose signature ability actually works off of your critical hits. Now, this is going to give Winter Soldier a little bit more reliability to his power drain. So this change to Dexterity, along with the Killmonger synergy that he recently just got, and Winter Soldier, suddenly, he might actually be really powerful if this update does go through. Again, it might not. Archangel is a character that will benefit quite a bit if these Dexterity changes go through to the live servers, because as you can see here, he actually has a chance to cause bleed on his critical hits. He has a chance to cause bleed on heavy attacks and critical hits, and the way that works is if your heavy attacks land a critical hit, you could potentially get 2 bleeds out of that 1 hit of your heavy attack. Now, your heavy attack has actually 3 hits to it, and because Dexterity lasts for 0.7 seconds, I tested it, and you could actually hit all 3 of your heavy attack hits within that 0.7 second window, which means you have an extra 950 crit rating for your entire heavy attack instead of just that first initial hit like it was, or like it is on live servers right now. So this could allow you to get a lot more consistent bleed applications with Archangel, get those neurotoxins up faster, allow you to shut down abilities more consistently. So yeah, this could be a pretty big deal for Archangel if these changes do hit live servers. There's actually a lot of characters that could benefit from that crit rating to apply bleeds. Take a look at DRAX here, who has a 40% chance on critical hit to inflict his bleed. And once you get those Furies going with DRAX, his bleeds actually deal quite a bit of damage. I don't know if it would be enough to kind of put him into a top tier category, probably not, but it could still be a pretty big buff to DRAX, who has that double hit on his medium, and now you're getting that additional crit rate on both of those hits instead of just the first one. And I haven't tested it, I haven't actually played around with DRAX himself, but I'm pretty sure you could actually get your first double hit medium and then your first light attack before that, before the Dexterity buff goes away. So yeah, it's kind of a big deal. It's definitely an increase to DRAX's damage if the changes go through. There's Wolverine, X-23, all these other additional characters that will gain that bleed on critical hit as well. I've got 3 Mystic characters here all lined up that will actually benefit from that additional crit rating too, as Guillotine will also apply a bleed on critical hits, or has a chance to at least, so that's going to increase Guillotine's damage. And the Mystic Dispersion change, as far as using Mystic characters offensively goes, it's basically the exact same thing. It really changes it when you're playing against Mystic Dispersion. So, yeah, Mystic characters, if you like to use them and you like the Mystic Dispersion mastery, then you're still going to like this update. Scarlet Witch, of course, she benefits from getting that additional crit rate with her signature ability. And then we have Iron Fist here too, who on critical hits, that's when he has a chance to apply his armor break. So yeah, this has a pretty big impact on a wide range of characters and all types of abilities. Now, it is not a 950 crit rating buff across the board for all of your attacks. That's kind of important to remember, that it's just going to be on if you're doing like a regular 5-hit combo without any kind of way to increase the duration of that 0.2 dexterity buff, really it's just going to be like your first 2 attacks instead of your first attack. But that's still a big deal, right? It's not going to completely like double your damage or anything like that, but it is going to definitely increase your damage overall, which is cool. And if you can find ways to kind of cleverly weave it in to your abilities, like during the testing I found that if I used my special 2 with Medusa and she's kind of spinning around, she gets a few hits in before the buff expires. So yeah, depending on the characters they're using, maybe you could find some creative way to really take advantage of that increased window of time to get that critical rating. It's actually so good that I'm almost positive that if these changes do hit the live servers, that I'll be taking points out of my normal mastery build here. I'll take points out of like Assassin. I'll take 2 points out of that, and I'll put like 3 points into Dexterity, just to get that additional crit rating. But enough about Dexterity. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of these proposed changes, and I hope it goes through as is. And this is why I like change in games just in general. It's still the same game that I love. It's still Marvel Contest of Champions, but it allows me to kind of relearn the game and look at some older champions that I kind of forgot existed. Maybe they're a little bit more powerful with something like this. Maybe you could find little unique things like with Hyperion and being able to extend the duration and just make him a much more powerful champion. So really cool. Hope it goes through as is. But let's talk more about the proposed Mystic Dispersion changes. And this one is going to take me a little bit more time to kind of wrap my head around, even though it seems simple enough. But let's read the description one more time. It says, Mystic champions gain 12% power each time a buff is nullified or its duration expires. Those are the 2 conditions, right? Buff has to either be nullified or duration expires off their opponent. Now, the first example I'm going to show you with Star-Lord here is a little bit easier to understand than the example that I'm going to explain with Medusa. So with Star-Lord, it says here, for all his attacks, he has an 11% chance to gain Fury for 6.5 seconds. Now, if that buff expires on its own or it gets nullified, of course the enemy is going to be gaining power, right? But if you refresh that buff before it expires, then it didn't get nullified and it didn't expire, right? So they're not going to be gaining any power. So let's see if we can get an example of that real quick. Alright, now Star-Lord here is a little bit low level, so hopefully I can take enough hits before I go down to show you the way that this works. And of course, when my Dexterity buff is used up, they're still going to be gaining power that way, so they still gain a lot more power than the average champion, these Mystic champions, that is. Oh man, I'm really not gaining the Fury buff. 17 hits and no Fury buff. Oh, there we go. Alright, so I gained Fury, and boom, I just refreshed it a whole bunch. Now, in the past, that would, take away the buff, and it would just kind of feed the power of Unstoppable Colossus here. Like, he would have been at like a special 2 immediately, just from me refreshing that Fury buff like I did multiple times like that. So, yeah, it's much better with champions that have a percentage chance to gain a buff on attack. Definitely going to be good depending on the champion they're using. Opens up the development for Kabam, I'm sure, for them to add cool abilities to these champions and not have to think like, okay, well, that's automatically going to make them useless in Alliance War because of a buff that the character gained, right? Alright, now let's talk a little bit more about Medusa. So, one more time. Mystic Dispersion. They gain power when a buff is nullified or the duration expires, right? Let's take a look at Medusa's ability here. Now, her signature ability, the second bullet pointer in her signature ability says, when struck twice, Medusa has a chance to auto-block with her hair, breaking the opponent's combo for the cost of 3 Fury buffs. Now, technically, it's not being nullified to use those Furies, and they're not really expiring, right? It's not like a timer that's expiring. You're just using those Furies in order to auto-block. So, how does that actually work? Well, let's actually go into a fight here and test this out. Now, on the beta server, once again, I want to remind you that there could potentially be some bugs, right? This is a totally new thing, and there's a lot of characters in this game, so we can't expect to have everything working properly right from the get-go. And I'm going to get hit on purpose now, and there's the auto-block. Alright, so I auto-blocked, and he gained a lot of power, right? He gained 3 instances of that Mystic Dispersion power, where, you know, he gained essentially 36% power, so more than a bar of power just off of that, the Fury's expiring. Let's try that one more time here. I'm going to get hit on purpose. Okay, and he gained another bar of power right there. So that's the way that it works on the beta right now. However, when this was reported on the kind of the beta section of the forums that Kabam has all set up, the response from the devs is that they're going to look into that because it might not actually supposed to be working this way. I don't know if they were really able to 100% confirm it either way. I think it was more of they're going to look into it and kind of you know, figure out which is most appropriate for this specific scenario. But if it is in fact a bug the way it's working right now, and if you're not supposed to be triggering Mystic Dispersion by using those Furies since it's not being nullified and it's not expiring, then that opens up a new way to play Medusa against Mystic champions. You can intentionally trigger your auto block in order to kind of get around that whole them gaining a crazy amount of power when your Furies expire, right? Because if you've watched any of my war videos when I play Medusa against a Mystic champion, I've got to be thinking about when my Furies expire. And I always have Black Bolt on my team, so I have 6 Furies. And when 6 Furies expire, man, they shoot up to an L3 real fast. So if I can kind of play around that, and when I'm on my 6th Fury, if I can just, you know, let myself get hit a couple times, that's pretty cool, man. I won't actually be triggering Mystic Dispersion. So I would have to have my Medusa at Sig 200 because right now it's, you know, she's not at 100% chance to auto block. So if I let my guard down and just eat a 5-hit combo, that could be way worse than anything. You know, but there could be unique situations like that where it allows you another tool to play with to get around that ability. But what does that mean for your Mystic Defenders? Are they taking yet another hit in their effectiveness with these changes to Mystic Dispersion? Well, sort of. I mean, it's going to be a little bit easier to fight these guys, but they're still going to be top-tier defenders. You're definitely still going to want to have Morningstar and Dormammu ranked up and on defense. It's still going to be some of the most powerful defenders around, and you're not always going to be able to play around Mystic Dispersion. There's going to be situations where, yeah, you're still going to get crushed by these guys because of all that extra power that they're able to gain through the Mystic Dispersion mastery, but it's going to make the fights a little bit more fair, in my opinion. The way it works on live servers right now is when Morningstar shoots her L2, it's a 3-hit. It's one beam that you evade, so you only dash back a single time, but it's technically a 3-hit kind of a combo in that beam. And the way it works right now, yeah, she gains 12% times 3. She's getting 36% power, and on a node where she already might have some power gain as it is, you know, you barely get to attack at all against this champion. Before she's back to another L2, and it felt really unfair. Or what about that situation where, yeah, all you're doing is swiping back, you're trying to bait out a special, you swipe back a couple times, a core mechanic of the game, and suddenly they're at their 3rd bar of power. It just didn't feel fair. So yeah, they're still going to be great defenders, but it's going to be more of a fair fight. So I'm actually a big fan of both of these changes, Dexterity and Mystic Dispersion. The best way I can sum it up is that it just feels like you have more control over what's going on in a fight, and it feels like there are things to discover with the Dexterity changes. You're not going to just be instantly getting hit by an L3 against Mystic champions. You can use more champions against Mystic defenders to kind of open up that variety and who people rank up and take to attack and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm a fan of both of these changes, and again, we don't know if these are finalized. We don't know if these are actually going to be hitting the live servers, but I'd be happy if Kabam just implemented them as is. If there's any kind of updates to the beta servers, I will of course be keeping you guys up to date, and I'll make a second video, but as of right now, yeah, I hope these changes actually just go live. Alright, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.